Hello everyone, this is Dr. Julia with Harmonious Living. I'm so glad that you joined me. So come on in and take a seat and make yourself comfortable. As a life coach, it is my goal to help you live a more harmonious life with purpose, passion, positivity, and power. In this season, I have 10 episodes of inspiration and wisdom. In order to receive the maximum benefit from this season, try to listen to the podcast in their entirety. One more thing, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review about the tips and practical advice given in this episode. If you need life coaching, please contact me. The information is in the description box. The title of this episode is 1 Degree of Separation and the Journey to Forgiveness. A fatal accident has a domino effect on 4 families with only 1 degree of separation. So listen to this episode as Linda goes through the stages of forgiveness after her life comes to a crashing halt. First, let me introduce the cast of characters. They're all from Tyler, Texas. Linda Hamilton is 30 years old. She's married to Dan, who's 33. He's an EMT, and Linda works in a hospital as an admittance clerk in the ER. Linda's parents are Beth Moore and Curtis Moore. Now, Beth's a retired high school teacher, and Curtis is a long-haul truck driver for Jensen trucking. Dan's parents are Frank and Frances Hamilton, and Frank is a retired high school football coach, and Frances is an ESL teacher at the elementary school. Until 10 years ago, most of her students were from Mexico and Central America. Since then, she has had students from Germany, Vietnam, the Ukraine, Yemen, and many other countries. Diedrich Jensen, 63, owns Jensen Trucking. His parents were German immigrants, and he speaks fluent German. Mary, his first wife, is 58, who became addicted to pain pills after being in a bad car accident. She was hit by a drunk driver. Even with the urging of family and friends, Mary refused to go to rehab, insisting that she could kick the habit on her own. And after 15 years of marriage, Diedrich filed for a divorce because of her refusal to get clean and sober. His current wife, Ingrid, is from Germany and she's 55, and she has twin daughters ages 16. Ingrid and Diedrich dated briefly 30 years ago when he was in the service. They reconnected on social media 10 years ago and decided to get married. Ingrid then moved to the U.S. with her daughters. Stefan Jensen is Diedrich's youngest son, who is 20 when he attends college in Denton on a football scholarship. He comes home frequently because it's only a 2-hour drive, and he enjoys driving his Range Rover that he received for his high school graduation. Now, let's go back a few years. It's important for you to understand the chain of events in Stefan and Linda's lives. During high school, Stefan was hard to handle, and he resented Ingrid and his stepsisters living in the house that his parents built. He would get up after everyone went to bed, and he would pour his dad's alcohol into his sports bottles so he could drink without anyone suspecting. And one day during his junior year, he showed up drunk in his world history class. Mrs. Moore called the resource officer to remove him from the classroom. He was suspended for the rest of the semester. His father, Diedrich, enrolled him in an online homeschool so he would be able to graduate on time with the rest of his class the following year. He also received counseling and attended a 12-step group for teens. Stefan's daily routine was to lock himself in his room until his dad got home. Ingrid would knock on the door and tell him when dinner was ready. She would always speak in German because she wanted him to be fluent.
Stefan, das Abendessen ist fertig. Ich habe Sauerbraten, Kohl, Kartoffeln und Roggenbrot gekocht.
Stefan would get frustrated and yell at Ingrid.
This isn't Oktoberfest. Why can't you just speak English and make me some American food, like spaghetti and meatballs, some French bread, and a Greek salad? Is that so hard, Ingrid?
Then Ingrid would acquiesce and tell him what she cooked for dinner in English.
Stefan, it is time for dinner. I have cooked Sauerbraten with potatoes and cabbage and rye bread.
When his dad got home, he would make excuses for Stefan. He told Ingrid and the girls that Stefan never got over the divorce and that his mother doesn't make time for him because she doesn't want him to see her intoxicated. She tells him that she's working when he really wants to go visit, and she's really not working. She passes out for hours at a time. Now let's move ahead 3 years. Linda and Dan have been married for 4 years, and they're both from Tyler, but they currently live in Denton. Dan works as an EMT, and he usually works the first shift unless he's on call. Linda recently quit that job as an admittance clerk in the ER. She said that she was getting traumatized by seeing so many people with life-threatening injuries and conditions, and sometimes they came in and they were already expired. The last straw is when she saw a young woman, maybe 19 or 20, who suffered severe injuries after being in a car accident. She was thrown from the car because she was not wearing a seatbelt. When her boyfriend came to check on her, he reeked of alcohol, and she wondered if he was the driver. A couple of months later, Linda and Dan were enjoying their new house and making it feel like home. It was Labor Day weekend, which is a busy weekend for emergency personnel, unfortunately. Dan worked an hour overtime because of the accidents on the freeway, because of the rainstorm. When he got home, he reminded Linda that he was on call and would probably get called in if the rain continued. As expected, after dinner, Dan received a call to come in. Dan said,
Well, the good news is that I'm off until next Tuesday. So that will give me time to cut the yard, and then I will go with you to buy patio furniture, babe.
As Dan left, the rainstorm started to pick up. Linda decided to watch HGTV while Dan was at work. She fell asleep and woke up to see that Dan had sent her a text stating that he was on his way home. After an hour, he still wasn't there. Even with the rain, it should not have taken more than 20 minutes. She tried to call his cell, but it went to voicemail. And he didn't respond by text either. She called dispatch, and they confirmed that he left an hour ago. She checked the app and saw that his phone was pinging from the hospital. A few minutes later, she received a call from the emergency room, informing her that Dan had been in an accident and to get there as soon as possible. When she arrived, she was told that he was in a head-on collision and that he was in surgery. He suffered several internal injuries that included broken ribs and a collapsed lung. After 2 hours of being in surgery, his surgeon came out and told her that he lost a lot of blood before transport and that he went to cardiac arrest during the transport and also in surgery. They spent an hour trying to revive him, but they were not successful. Linda became hysterical and she let out a blood-curdling scream before she fainted. When she woke up, she was in the room in ER with the hospital chaplain and a social worker. They gave her information about the next course of action and offered their support when she called her parents. Of course, they were devastated, and they told her they would contact Dan's parents and they would all be there the first thing in the morning. During the week, Linda's parents, Curtis and Beth Moore, and Dan's parents, Frank and Frances Hamilton, made burial arrangements in Tyler, and they packed up as much as they could in preparation for the drive home. That afternoon, they received a visit from a detective from the police department. He introduced himself as Detective Burns. He said,
I wanted to come in person and give you an update about the accident and answer any questions you may have. The young man who caused the fatal accident is a 20-year-old college student. His blood alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit. He has several speeding tickets and has a pending assault charge. He's being held in the county jail until his arraignment on Wednesday when he goes before the judge. If you don't want to attend the hearing, it's understandable. But if you do want to go, the docket starts at 9 a.m. If you have any other questions, young lady, please call me at this number. And my condolences to you and your family.
As he handed Linda his card. Linda, her parents, and in-laws arrived at the court bright and early. And as they sat down, Curtis thought he saw someone who looked just like his employer, Dietrich Jensen. He said to himself, well, we all have a twin somewhere in the world. It was 10:30 before a young man accused of causing the fatal accident was escorted into the courtroom by the bailiff. He was in the county jail attire, an orange jumpsuit. Well, orange is still the orange, not black, with his wrist and ankles shackled. When he stood before the judge, the entire family gasped and held their mouths open as they recognized Stefan.
What the? I can't believe
I
it.
know that kid.
This can't be true. It just can't be true.
Beth remembered that he came to her world history class drunk and was suspended from school for the rest of the semester. Frank Hamilton was his football coach and remembered that he was a really good athlete, but he was also obstinate and rebellious. He benched him for several games for missing practice and fighting with other players in the locker room. Linda recognized him from the ER and then remembered the putrid smell of alcohol. Phew! The judge set his bail at $5,000 and told him not to leave town until his trial. Just to make sure he would not jump bail, he was fitted for an ankle monitor. And when they all left the courtroom, Dietrich Jensen looked over and recognized the families. He was confused at first, until he realized that his son caused the accident that killed one of their family members. He held his head down in shame, and he walked briskly out of the courtroom, avoiding eye contact. When he got into his car, he yelled at the top of his lungs and he started crying uncontrollably. He could not believe that his son caused a fatal accident that impacted families from his hometown, as well as his senior truck driver, Curtis Moore. How could life be so cruel?
God, this can't be happening to me. This can't be happening to me.
Word of wisdom: trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. Now let's move ahead 6 months. Stefan Jensen was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 3 years in prison with a $10,000 fine. The assault charge was dropped by the victim, and his father paid off all of his speeding tickets. Linda sold her house in Denton and moved back to Tyler. And shortly after the funeral, she found out she was pregnant and is currently in her 3rd trimester. She lives with her parents, and she decided that this is no time to be alone. Her father, Curtis, quit his job at Jensen Trucking. He found it impossible to drive for a company where the owner's son was responsible for killing his son-in-law. He is no longer willing to drive long hauls anymore. He drives for another company where he has a regular daytime schedule and he's off on the weekends. It's less money, but he has changed his mindset and wants to be home every night with his family. The accident taught him that tomorrow is not promised to anyone. Dan's parents, Frank and Francis, decided to run a support group for adults whose lives were affected by drunk drivers. They also teach educational classes in person and online for people convicted of DUIs. Their mandate is to help save lives. After Stefan's conviction, his mother Mary started to feel guilty and partially responsible for her son's actions because she was less than an admirable role model. When she smelled alcohol on his breath, she would ignore it because she was still using, and she felt like she was being a hypocrite to tell him to stop something that she was not able to do. Because of the devastating consequences, Mary decided to stop making excuses for herself, and she admitted herself into a drug and alcohol rehab facility in Arizona. The irony is that she was hit by a drunk driver one night on her way to work, and the injury she sustained led her to dependence on oxycodone, a powerful and addictive pain medication. Now I will illustrate how Linda goes through 4 stages of forgiveness after the tragedy. These are real-life events that can happen to anyone. I use fictional characters and a fictional story to get my message across. What I talk about, I know about. In the first phase, Linda is astonished at how the accident affected her and everyone else in her life. She feels like her life has stopped, that the world no longer rotates, and she is stuck in perpetual darkness. She and her husband Dan were building a life together, and he was taken away from her before he knew that he was about to become a father. After his death, there was no reason to live and didn't, so she sold the house. She's back in Tyler, living with her parents. Sometimes she is so depressed that she cries all day and cannot get out of bed. Her mother, Beth, will gently knock on the door to bring lunch and to see how she is doing.
Linda, honey, you need to eat something for yourself and the baby. I made you some sweet iced tea and my homemade chicken soup, which you love.
Beth left the tray of food in the room and went back to the family room to sit in her own grief as she scrolled through Netflix, trying to distract herself. In the second phase, Linda agreed to attend Christian counseling, life coaching, as well as a grief support group. She was taught about forgiveness and the many misconceptions she had. She was of the mistaken belief that forgiveness meant that she had to ignore the injustice of the drunk driving accident because of the offender's age and because it was his first offense. She used to wish that harm would come to Stefan and his family so they could feel the same pain she felt. Her life coach reminded her of the scripture that states, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord," and the other scripture that says that he will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked. After several months of counseling, she understood what forgiveness is and what forgiveness is not, and that it was her choice whether or not to forgive Stefan. Her forgiveness journey started with the decision to overcome the depression and anxiety that was caused by the accident that killed her husband. She spent a year being angry and overwhelmed with emotions. A few months after the birth of her baby, Linda knew that it was time to move on and resolve the issues that kept her bound in unforgiveness and pain. She no longer felt disgust for Stefan that she once did, because she wanted to heal, and it was time to move on. Word of wisdom: know when there's a time to weep, and know when there's a time to laugh. You need to know there is a time to mourn, and it's justified, but you need to know when it's time to dance, and you need to know when it's your time. As Linda entered the third phase, in the support group she learned that there's a genetic component to addiction. Linda began to have conversations with other people in the community about Stefan and his family. She found out that Stefan's mother, Mary, was addicted to pain pills and did not enter treatment until after the fatal accident. Linda spent a lot of time processing her thoughts and emotions, and she had to be honest with herself, because when she was in college, she used to hang out with her friend group and drink, and then she'd drive home. Looking back on those days, she knew it was just by the grace of God that she was never in an accident herself. One Sunday morning after church service, she was approached by Mary, Stefan's mother, and Mary said,
The last time I went to visit Stefan in prison, he told me that he wrote you a letter. I didn't read it, of course, but it was very important to him that you get this. Can you please forgive me for not doing a better job of raising my son? I wasn't clean and sober then, and I felt like, he really didn't need me since his dad remarried and all.
Linda felt very uncomfortable as she hugged Mary briefly, and she didn't comment, and she ran to her car crying and drove off as quickly as she could. When Linda got home, she wasn't ready to read the letter, and she stuffed that letter into her desk drawer. A few more months passed as Linda progressed into phase 4, the final phase in her journey to forgiveness. Linda decided that it was time to read the letter from Stefan, so she took it from her desk drawer and went outside on the back porch to be alone while her daughter slept. Dear Miss Linda, I've been locked up for 2 years now, and I've had plenty of time to think about all the pain I've caused you in your family and my family as well. I used to think that I was in control and that I was invincible. I want you to know that I regret getting to my Range Rover that night after being out drinking with the football team. It was raining and the roads were wet. I thought I had plenty of time to get through that light before it turned red. But as I sped up, I lost control of my vehicle and I hit your husband's compact Kia head on in the middle of the intersection. I'll never forget that day. I'm sober now and attend 12-step meetings in prison, as well as individual and group counseling. We also have a chapel. I attend every service every Sunday, and I also have a sponsor. My actions caused a domino effect in all of our lives. But one good thing that came from this is that me and my mom got clean and sober, and we've started to heal our relationship. I pray that one day you'll be able to forgive me, but if you don't, understand completely. Blessings to you and your family. Stefan. Linda cried for a few minutes as she folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. It's been over 2 years since the accident. She used to tell herself that she could not live without Dan. After facing her fears, she's come to the conclusion that she's capable of taking care of herself and her daughter. She's decided to go back to school and finish her teaching degree. She no longer feels hate for Stefan and has forgiven him. She plans on writing him a letter expressing how she felt then and how she feels now, and that forgiving him is part of her journey to healing. Linda knows that day forever changed her life, but she's decided not to wallow in sadness, and she wants to create a joyful atmosphere in which to raise her daughter. She feels more compassion for Stefan and no longer wishes harm on him and his family. She still believes that he received a light sentence for his crime. She now accepts the judge's decision and is ready to leave the past behind. Word of wisdom. Old things have passed away, and behold, all things will become new. Well, we have come to the end of the episode. What I want you to understand is that forgiveness is an emotional change. Forgiveness is a cognitive change, and forgiveness is a decision to change. Just like Linda, you can forgive the person who did you wrong and cause great pain in your life without ever speaking to them directly. The other lesson in this episode is that there's only 1 degree of separation between Stefan and the 4 families that were impacted from his drunk driving accident. Putting it another way, there is action and reaction, and everything we do affects everything, whether great or small. I enjoyed being with you, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast as well. For your individual life coaching and consulting sessions, please DM me on Instagram at Dr. Julia Floyd. And please follow me on YouTube and Facebook. The links are in the description box. Before you go, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review, because we're all in this together. And I'll see you next time on Harmonious Living with Dr. Julia. Ciao.